There is a bid sitting on a desk in Leicester right now, and the number attached to it is somewhere between £10 million and £15 million. The player in question is 16 years old. He has already played in the Premier League, he has already played in the Championship, and the club trying to sign him is moving with real urgency because the calendar is working against them. That player is Jeremy Munga, and Arsenal have sent an official approach for him. This is not speculation. A bid is in, talks are ongoing, and the reason for the pace is simple. Monga signed an academy scholarship at 16, and that scholarship is due to convert into a professional contract on his 17th birthday, which falls on July the 10th. Once that happens, the shape of these talks, and possibly the price, could shift. Arsenal know it, Leicester know it. That is why this is moving as quickly as it is. Here is what makes this delicate. Leicester have already shown once that they can hold on to him under pressure. Despite being relegated from the Premier League to the Championship last year, they managed to see off interest in Monga and get him to sign that scholarship anyway. Now they have been relegated again, this time all the way down to League One, and the question being weighed inside the club is whether a year developing in a much weaker division actually helps a 16-year-old who has already tasted the top flight, or whether it holds him back. That uncertainty is exactly the kind of opening a club like Arsenal can work into. There is a second layer of risk too. Because of his age and his contract situation, there is a real chance this transfer ends up in front of a tribunal, where a panel decides what a fair fee looks like, rather than the two clubs settling it directly between themselves. That adds time, it adds uncertainty, and it adds the chance that Arsenal end up paying more or less than either side currently expects. Before we go further into the names, the numbers and the situations shaping this window, if you want this level of detail on every major Arsenal story, without the noise and without the guesswork, this is exactly what this channel is built for. Hit subscribe now so you do not miss the next breakdown, the Monga race in full. Let's go back through exactly how we got here, because the detail matters. Monga made his Leicester debut in the Premier League during the 2024 to 2025 season, coming off the bench at 15 years old, 8 months and 28 days old, in a 3-0 defeat to Newcastle United on April the 7th. That made him at the time the second youngest player ever to appear in the Premier League. That ranking has since shifted because Arsenal's own young prospect Max Dowman has pushed him back into third place on that particular list. The numbers around his most recent season are what make this bid make sense. He made 30 appearances across all competitions in the 2025 to 2026 campaign, and he became the Championship's youngest ever goalscorer when he netted against Preston North End in August. He has also been involved with England's under-18 side recently, scoring the decisive goal in a 2-1 win over Greece under-19s, and getting on the score sheet again in a 6-1 win over Cyprus. It is also worth knowing this is not happening in isolation. Arsenal have already agreed a separate deal to sign Victor Osimhen, who will join the club in the January transfer window of next season, and they have also agreed to bring in Ecuadorian twins Edwin and Holger Quintero, who are set to arrive in August of 2027. None of these are short-term first-team additions. They are long-term bets on talent identified early. My read on this is straightforward. This recruitment pattern is not new for this academy pipeline. Miles Lewis-Skelly and Max Dowman have already become genuine first-team success stories out of it, and the very squad that won the Premier League this season includes William Saliba, who originally joined the club at 18 years old himself. Monga, on that evidence, fits a model Arsenal have already proven works. The Monga situation is confirmed active business. Everything else around the Osimhen and Quintero additions is also confirmed, but those are deals already agreed for future windows, not new news breaking today. The Alvarez release clause wall moving to a completely different number now, the situation around Julian Alvarez at Atletico Madrid. Atletico's position has been made unmistakably clear to every club that has come calling, Arsenal included. He only leaves if his full release clause is paid, and that figure stands at £431 million. Atletico's own president, Enrique Cerezo, has personally insisted that Alvarez remains an Atletico player and that he expects him to stay at the club. According to reporting from the Daily Mirror, this was tested directly when Real Madrid came in with an offer of €150 million and had it flatly rejected, with Atletico simply pointing them back toward the release clause instead of negotiating at all. What this tells me is that any conversation about Alvarez right now is not really a negotiation in the traditional sense. Atletico are not haggling. They are using the release clause as a wall, not as a starting point for talks. So the real question for Arsenal, or for anyone else circling this situation, is not what Alvarez is worth on the pitch. It is whether any club is genuinely prepared to trigger that exact figure in full. As things stand, this is confirmed Atletico policy, not a rumour, even if no club has yet met that number. The Alvarez agreement claims that did not hold up. That brings us to a separate claim that needs addressing directly, because it has been doing the rounds. There was talk of an actual agreement already being in place between Arsenal and Atletico Madrid for Alvarez. That claim does not hold up, and it has been firmly knocked down. What is being acknowledged instead is something much narrower and still very much speculative, that a swap deal involving Arsenal and Atletico is possible in theory, but with one specific complication attached to it. Mikel Arteta is reluctant to have Victor Gyökeres included as part of any such arrangement. I want to be clear that this swap framing remains rumour territory and nothing more concrete than that right now. But the detail about Arteta's reluctance still tells you a lot about how Arsenal currently view their own striker. Gyökeres is not being treated as a player who is expendable in order to fund a marquee arrival. He is being treated as someone the club wants to build around, even when a name as significant as Alvarez is the one being floated in exchange. Arsenal shut down the swap talk entirely. Then came an even more direct denial. Arsenal have stated plainly that there have been no talks, no negotiations, and no swap proposals whatsoever involving Gyökeres, Morgan Rogers, or Alvarez. Not exploratory conversations, not informal contact, nothing at all. The framing given alongside that denial matters too, because the reasoning is that Gyökeres is viewed as a key part of Mikel Arteta's long-term plans, not as a trading chip to be moved on for someone else. Put the last 2 points together and you get a fairly consistent picture. Whatever level of interest exists in bringing in a forward of either Alvarez's or Rodgers' profile, Arsenal's working position right now is that it will not be funded by moving Gyökeres on. If that holds through the rest of the window, it tells you Arsenal see a future squad with Gyökeres very much still in it, regardless of who else arrives around him. This denial itself is confirmed and direct. The swap talk it is denying remains unconfirmed speculation. Morgan Rogers, and the door left open for a second signing. Speaking of Rodgers, there is something here worth tracking closely, even though it is still in the planning stage rather than the action stage. Arsenal are understood to be reviewing the necessary conditions before they even submit an offer for Bradley Barcola. The detail that stands out is that there remains a real possibility Arsenal could pursue both Morgan Rogers and an additional attacking signing in the same window, with Barcola specifically named as one of the candidates being considered alongside him. This matters because it suggests Arsenal are not treating their forward business as a single arrival and done. They appear to be weighing up whether the budget and the squad balance allow for more than one major attacking name to come in during the same summer, rather than framing it as an either-or decision between Rodgers and Barcola. None of this is a bid yet. It is a club working through conditions before it commits to one. Rashford's release clause loophole, now to a number that, on the surface, looks almost too good to be true. Marcus Rashford's release clause is reported at £40 million, and according to the terms being discussed, that clause applies to every club except Manchester City and Liverpool. In theory, that means Arsenal could enter the race for him at that exact price, a figure that looks remarkably low given his current output. Last season at Barcelona, Rashford played 2,622 minutes, scored 14 goals and provided 14 assists across 49 matches in total. The way I read this, a £40 million figure attached to a player producing those numbers is the kind of release clause that forces a club's hand, because waiting around risks someone else moving first at a price that will not stay available for long once the window opens properly. I want to flag clearly, though, this is still presented as a possibility rather than confirmed interest from Arsenal. The clause existing is one thing. Arsenal actually moving on it is another. Igor Thiago and a name being kept warm. On a different kind of attacking option entirely, Arsenal continue to monitor Brentford striker Igor Thiago. According to reporting from The Times, he has become a regular topic of discussion inside Arsenal's recruitment team, and it is easy to understand why after a season in which he scored 22 Premier League goals. The complication is straightforward. Brentford value him at around €80 million, and he is contracted to the club until 2031, which gives Brentford very little incentive to negotiate down from that figure. This one looks less like an active chase right now and more like a name being kept warm in the background. Arsenal are not forcing the issue here. They appear to simply be positioning themselves in case Brentford's stance ever softens further down the line. Treat this as monitoring, not pursuit for now. The wish list built around Boadi, Truffert and a record sale. Now let's get into a much broader picture, and I want to be completely upfront about what this section actually is. This is not confirmed transfer business. This is a constructed, opinion-based picture of what an ideal version of this window could look like, built name by name and role by role. Treat everything in this section as a wish list, not as done deals. The standout midfield target in this picture is Ayoub Boadi of Lille, who also represents Morocco internationally. The reported price tag sits above £60 million, and when you compare that to the kind of money being discussed for players like Sandro Tonali, Adam Wharton and Mateus Fernandes, that number for a player of Boadi's ceiling looks like genuine value. The thinking here is that he would slot in behind more experienced midfield options for now, with a long-term view toward eventually replacing that experience entirely. At full-back, the picture is more complicated. A move for Nathaniel Brown looks effectively off the table on the left, with Bayern Munich positioned strongly for him. On the right, Marco Palestra of Atalanta is the name under consideration, but that one is described as a tricky deal to actually complete, given a separate move to Inter Milan appears to already be progressing. As an alternative, Ivan Fresneda is viewed as more realistic to get done, even though he is considered more attacking and a little more exposed defensively than ideal, with the reasoning being that options to rotate with Jurrien Timber are simply not plentiful, so a degree of compromise becomes acceptable. On the left side specifically, Adrian Truffert of Bournemouth is the name drawing the most enthusiasm, with the idea being that he would offer a more attacking option on that flank, allowing Piero Hincapié and Riccardo Calafiori to operate purely as depth behind Gabriel instead. The one caveat raised is that Bournemouth's reputation for driving a hard bargain could make this an expensive deal regardless of how it gets structured. Then there is the attacking section of this wish list where the boldest numbers appear. Morgan Rogers, even at an asking price reported above £85 million, is described as worth pursuing without hesitation. Christos Tzolis is positioned as a smart, lower-profile depth option for the left wing, described directly as a wildcard pick. And if there is room in the budget to go even further, both Bradley Barcola and Junior Krupi are named as additional possibilities, with Krupi specifically framed as more of a natural second striker who could still be dangerous if used from the left. To fund all of this, the same picture points toward two current first-team players potentially moving on, Gabriel Martinelli and Leandro Trossard, alongside the departures of Gabriel Jesus and Ethan Nwaneri, with the suggestion that selling Martinelli and Nwaneri in particular should set new club record sale figures, surpassing the existing benchmark set by Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's departure. On the retention side, the message is just as clear. Martin Odegaard and Kai Havertz are not viewed as for sale regardless of outside noise, and Noni Madueke, despite some frustration with his form this season, is described as a player whose case for staying is becoming more convincing over time. My read on this whole picture is that it represents an extremely aggressive version of the summer, the kind of plan that only becomes realistic because Arsenal are entering the window as champions, with the revenue and the room under the league's spending regulations to back it up. The closing message in this picture was pointed directly at one man. Over to you, Andrea Berta, the person currently tasked with turning this wish list into reality. Reiss Nelson's future comes back into focus on the exit side of things. Reiss Nelson is once again being linked with a move to West Ham. He has returned to Arsenal after a loan spell at Brentford that did not go the way either side had hoped, and the clearest signal of that is the fact that Brentford chose not to activate their £15 million buy option on him. West Ham have shown interest in him before, and the expectation right now is that they could revisit a move this summer. When a loan club declines its own buy option on a player, that usually tells you the value assessment did not improve much during the loan spell, and that tends to push a player toward a permanent exit rather than another loan, which looks like exactly the direction this situation is heading. I want to be clear, this is still a developing link rather than a confirmed approach from West Ham. England duty and what the numbers reveal shifting briefly to international action, because performance data at this level still feeds directly into club form. In England's 4-2 win over Croatia, Declan Rice played 72 minutes, registered 1 assist, was involved in the joint most chances created on the pitch with 4, and made 4 recoveries. Bukayo Saka came on in the 72nd minute, also registered 1 assist and won 100% of his ground duels. Noni Madueke played the full 72 minutes before being withdrawn, won a penalty for England, created 2 separate chances, and also won 100% of his ground duels. Eberechi Eze remained on the bench throughout and did not feature in the match at all. Numbers like these matter beyond just the international break itself, because consistent involvement and high-impact performances at this level tend to carry directly into confidence and sharpness heading into pre-season. The case for Madueke building real momentum. That performance from Madueke specifically has drawn pointed praise, with the assessment being that he was electric from the very first minute, with very few wingers able to hug the touchline the way he does while still creating direct threat that consistently moves his team up the pitch and into the box. The specific point made is that England do not really have another player who replicates what he offers in that exact role, which is also given as the reason Thomas Tuchel rates him so highly. This connects directly back to the earlier point about Madueke's situation at club level, where the case for keeping him was already described as strengthening over time. A performance like this one on the international stage only adds further weight to that argument, a genuine scare over Declan Rice. Finally, a moment that will have caused a brief scare for anyone watching closely. Thomas Tuchel confirmed that Declan Rice pointed to discomfort in his lower back and upper hamstring during the game, and that the decision was made not to take any risks with him, describing it as a moment to protect him. Tuchel added that he hopes it is nothing more serious, and that Rice himself gave reassurance afterward that he felt fine, with Tuchel calling it nothing big to worry about. Any fitness concern involving a player is central to the team, as Rice deserves attention, but the language used here, protect rather than panic, and reassured rather than concerned, suggests this was a precaution taken out of caution, not a response to something that was already clearly serious. So if you pull all of this together, what you have is a club operating on several fronts at once, a near-term, fast-moving deal for a teenage winger that is already confirmed and in progress. A defensive wall in front of one superstar striker, alongside a firm denial around trading away their own forward. A long, ambitious wish list spanning midfield, both fullback positions and the front line. None of it confirmed, but all of it grounded in real reported figures. A handful of exit situations still working themselves out in the background, and a national team picture that is quietly shaping form and confidence ahead of next season. None of these stories exist in isolation, and that is exactly why this channel exists, to connect them properly instead of treating each one as a headline on its own. If this kind of breakdown is useful to you, subscribe, leave a comment with the story you want broken down next, and I will see you in the next one.